MS-13 is the gang that politicians love to talk about.
But little do people know that this gang has a completely different horror show depending on where you live. In this video, we'll break down state by state of where MS-13 is highly active in the United States according to the FBI.
California, destroyers in the City of Angels. MS-13 was born in Los Angeles in the 1980s. Salvadoran refugees fleeing a civil war, getting jumped by Mexican gangs, forming their own protection crew. Tale as old as time. Fast forward 40 years, and LA still has 15 to 20 active MS-13 cliques spread across the city. But here's where it gets dark. Like, really dark. MS-13 in Los Angeles doesn't just claim territory. They turn abandoned buildings into what they call destroyers. Let me explain what that means, because it's worse than it sounds. A destroyer is an abandoned or half-vacant apartment building that MS-13 takes over. They use it to party, to deal drugs, to sleep, and to kill people. In 2019, federal prosecutors charged 21 MS-13 members in Los Angeles with running a network of these buildings. One building in the Westlake Rampart area became the scene of at least 3 murders between 2017 and 2018. Victims were lured there, tortured, killed, sometimes dismembered. One victim had his heart cut out. The neighborhoods where this happens: Westlake, Pico Union, Koreatown, East Hollywood, North Hollywood. Dense immigrant areas where landlords let buildings rot and MS-13 fills the vacuum. It's hyper-local. We're talking about specific blocks, specific buildings, not all of LA, just the places where housing decay meets gang infrastructure. And here's the kicker. There's zero evidence that MS-13 controls the LAPD or City Hall. This isn't some conspiracy. It's just a street gang using the city's neglect as a weapon. If you've seen those photos of LAPD gang task forces posing with assault rifles and tactical gear, yeah, that's who they're going after. Not because MS-13 runs LA, because they turned empty apartments into murder factories. That's California, destroyers in the City of Angels. Next up, Long Island, where MS-13 turned suburban soccer fields into hunting grounds. New York, bodies in the woods on Long Island. Let's talk about Long Island. You know, the suburban sprawl east of New York City. Soccer moms, school districts, minivan. Also, machete murders in the woods behind the high school. Yeah, MS-13 on Long Island is a completely different beast than MS-13 in LA. No destroyers, no abandoned buildings, just parks, soccer fields, and greenbelts that turned into crime scenes. The pattern was always the same: teenagers walking home, getting lured into wooded areas near parks, then ambushed by groups with machetes and baseball bats. Nisa Mickens and Kayla Cuevas, 2 teenage girls murdered in 2016 in Brentwood. Their deaths became national news. But they weren't isolated incidents. Suffolk County's police commissioner told Congress that 38% of murders since 2016 were attributable to MS-13. 38% in Suffolk County. And here's the thing, numerically, MS-13 on Long Island is tiny. We're talking maybe a few hundred members at most. But the violence is so spectacular, so targeted, so visible, that it warped the entire public conversation. New York State poured tens of millions of dollars into Long Island specifically to fight MS-13. Park lighting, security cameras, youth programs, community centers. Politicians campaigned on it. School boards reorganized around it. ICE made it a priority. In 2025, Nassau County arrested 42 people in one of the largest gang takedowns in the county's history. 25 of them MS-13, mostly after machete attacks at a soccer game and a laundromat. This is the Long Island formula. Small numbers, maximum brutality, total media saturation. If California's MS-13 hides in the shadows of abandoned buildings, New York's MS-13 operates in broad daylight in suburban parks. And that terrifies people way more. Remember those soccer fields where your kid plays travel league? Yeah, MS-13 was there too. Next, Maryland, where MS-13 runs a protection racket out of a Fast and Furious movie. Maryland, extortion at the edge of DC. Welcome to the DC suburb. Montgomery County, Prince George's County, Silver Spring, Langley Park, Wheaton. This is where MS-13 isn't hunting people in the woods. They're not running destroyers. They're running a business. Let me set the scene. You own a pupusa stand, or a small market, or an informal bar. One day, a couple MS-13 members walk in. They don't threaten you, not at first. They just ask if you've been having any problems. Robberies, break-ins, that sort of thing. Then they offer to help, for a fee. Congrats, you're now paying rent to MS-13. This is old school mob stuff, protection rackets, extortion. The kind of thing you see in mafia movies, except it's happening right now in the DC suburbs to immigrant business owners who can't exactly call the cops. In 2019, a federal case sentenced an MS-13 member, nicknamed Pumbaa, yes, like the Lion King, for running an interstate extortion operation targeting businesses around Hyattsville and the broader DC metro. Another case detailed how MS-13 members shook down not just stores, but drug dealers, informal stores, and sex workers. You don't pay, you get beaten. Maybe your shop gets robbed. If you really don't pay, you get shot. Maryland State Police documented MS-13 activity in 13 of 23 counties. But the heart of it is those inner ring DC suburbs where Central American immigration overlaps with economic precarity. And just like everywhere else, no evidence of corrupted city governments. No MS-13 members on the police force, just localized economic control through fear. If Long Island is about body counts, and New York is about spectacle, Maryland is about the invisible tax on immigrant businesses. You might drive through Langley Park and never know what's happening, but if you own a shop there, you know. Next up, Virginia, where MS-13 hides in plain sight in suburban apartment complexes. Virginia, the suburban shadow of DC. Northern Virginia, Fairfax County, Prince William County, Manassas, Woodbridge. You know what these places look like. Garden apartments, cul-de-sacs, strip malls, Chili's, Target, the suburban sprawl of America. And MS-13 is everywhere in it. But not in the way you think. There's no MS-13 neighborhood in Northern Virginia, no single block they control. Instead, they're woven into the fabric of these sprawling suburbs, apartment complexes, school networks, parking lots along Route 1. In 2022, federal prosecutors charged 12 MS-13 members and associates with racketeering, drug trafficking, and 4 murders in eastern Prince William County, including double homicides. The defendants came from both Northern Virginia and New York, because that's how MS-13 works. Cliques in different states coordinating, moving people and orders back and forth. Jail data in Fairfax and Prince William showed sharp increases in identified MS-13 inmates between 2017 and 2018, suggesting either more activity or more enforcement, probably both. And then there's the politics. In 2025, federal agents arrested a man in Dale City and called him an MS-13 leader on the East Coast. Big press conference, major headlines. Then, the DOJ quietly moved to drop the charges a few weeks later. Why? Because MS-13 cases in Virginia get caught up in immigration politics as much as actual gang enforcement. Sanctuary policies, ICE cooperation, campaign ads. The gang is real. The violence is real. But the narrative around MS-13 in Virginia is also a political football. Their actual power? Social control within immigrant youth networks, targeting peers, rivals, and suspected snitches, embedded in the exurban apartment complexes where nobody's paying attention. If Maryland is about extortion and New York is about parks, Virginia is about the invisibility of it all. MS-13 in a Chili's parking lot, MS-13 at the high school, MS-13 in the garden apartments off I-95. You'd never know. Next, Texas, where MS-13 plugs into the cartel drug pipeline. Texas, cartel crossroads in Houston. Let's go to Houston. And let's be clear, MS-13 in Texas is not the same as MS-13 in New York or California. In Houston, MS-13 isn't about controlling neighborhoods or extorting businesses. They're a cell in a much larger drug trafficking network. Houston is a logistics city. Ports, highways, explosive exurban growth. And MS-13 fits into that infrastructure like a cog in a machine. In 2025, 8 MS-13 members in Houston pleaded guilty to a racketeering conspiracy involving multiple murders, extortion, drug trafficking, and witness tampering. Here's the part that made headlines. They killed people with machetes, bats, and strangulation. Then they took photos of the bodies and sent them to MS-13 leaders in El Salvador for approval. That's the Houston dynamic. Violence for internal discipline and status. And coordination with leadership abroad, because in Texas, MS-13 is part of a transnational smuggling and distribution network. MS-13 members have been arrested in fast-growing exurban developments like Colony Ridge in Liberty County, places where newly arrived immigrants can blend in and work in the informal drug economy. But here's the key difference. In Houston, MS-13 isn't the dominant force. They're one actor among many. Mexican cartels, local gangs. MS-13 is a connector, not the kingpin. Their role is middle management, moving product, enforcing debts, doing hits when ordered. If New York's MS-13 is about terrorizing parks and Maryland's is about extorting shops, Texas MS-13 is about being a reliable, brutal subcontractor in the drug trade. And that makes them dangerous in a completely different way. Because they're not trying to control Houston, they're just trying to keep the pipeline flowing. Next up, New Jersey, the quiet state that ran MS-13's East Coast operation. New Jersey, East Coast headquarters. Pop quiz. Which state has the most MS-13 leadership? If you said New York or California, you're wrong. It's New Jersey. The New Jersey State Commission of Investigation estimated over 700 non-incarcerated MS-13 members statewide, with the largest concentrations in Hudson, Union, Mercer, and Cumberland counties. But here's what makes New Jersey different. It's not just about numbers, it's about command and control. New Jersey hosted East Coast leaders who directed operations from Long Branch and Hudson County, coordinating hits, approving murders, managing drug distribution into New York, Maryland, Virginia, Massachusetts, and even Houston. One leader allegedly ordered a drive-by shooting of a North Bergen restaurant when the owner stopped paying protection money. Another sanctioned a 2015 execution of a suspected rival in West New York. The Plainfield clique alone sent more than a dozen members to federal prison for 5 murders and multiple machete and firearm assaults. So why New Jersey? Why not New York or LA? Because New Jersey is quiet. Dense urban corridors, Jersey City, Newark, Plainfield, Trenton, with significant Central American populations. Close to New York, but not under the same media spotlight. It's the perfect place to coordinate without drawing attention. And for years, that's exactly what MS-13 did. Business owners paid rent. Leaders called the shots. Money and orders flowed up and down the East Coast. Aggressive prosecutions and ICE removals have reduced visible activity in recent years, but the infrastructure is still there. If Long Island is the visible face of East Coast MS-13, and Maryland is the extortion engine, New Jersey is the back office. The place where calls get made, where green lights get approved, where the money gets counted. You won't see it on the news, but it's there. Next, North Carolina, where MS-13 runs like a franchise. North Carolina, the Charlotte connection. Let's talk about Charlotte. Booming Sunbelt city, banking hub, growing Central American population, and MS-13. But here's the thing, MS-13 in Charlotte isn't about controlling neighborhoods or running extortion rings. It's about being a franchise plugged into a national and Central American network. In 2025, 2 MS-13 members in Charlotte were each sentenced to 35 years for a 2022 nightclub area murder. A third member got 20 years for RICO conspiracy. The DOJ emphasized that this wasn't random violence, it was gang business. Murder in aid of racketeering. Following orders. Enforcing status. And here's where it gets interesting. A Fourth Circuit opinion on an earlier Charlotte MS-13 case describes how local cliques extorted drug dealers, trafficked narcotics, and remitted funds to leadership in El Salvador. That's the franchise model. Local cliques operate semi-independently, but they send dues and profits up the chain. In exchange, they get the brand, the reputation, and sometimes orders from above. Charlotte MS-13 also uses gun violence against rivals and suspected informants, showing they're not just following some playbook from LA or New York. They adapt to local conditions. Federal cases describe Charlotte as part of a corridor, up to Virginia and Maryland, down to Georgia and Texas. Not an isolated island, but a node in a network. If Houston is about drug logistics and New Jersey is about command, Charlotte is about being a connected franchise. They're MS-13, but they're also distinctly Charlotte MS-13. Local recruitment, local violence, local drug markets, but global brand. And that's what makes them dangerous. Because they can call on resources and status from across the country and across borders, even while operating in a mid-sized southern city. Last stop, Washington State, where MS-13 shows up in the orchards and the ports. Washington State. Gangs in the orchard and the port. Final state, Washington. And this one's weird, because MS-13 in Washington State doesn't look like MS-13 anywhere else. They're not running destroyers. They're not hunting people in parks. They're not even the dominant gang. They're just there, in Yakima, in Tacoma, plugged into drug markets. Yakima is an agricultural region in central Washington with entrenched cartel and street gang drug networks, and MS-13 members show up as brokers and suppliers. In 2018, a Yakima man named Daniel Rivera Diaz, nicknamed JD Primo, was charged with operating as a major drug trafficker and alleged MS-13 associate. He was brokering heroin deals from a federal prison and supplying MS-13 in the Northeast. Over in Tacoma, Prosecutors charged suspects for the 2016 gang initiation murder of Samuel Cruces Vasquez, stabbed and beaten as part of an MS-13 initiation ritual. The 2019 Tacoma Gang Assessment lists MS-13 among identified gangs tracked by the Department of Corrections, but it's clear they're a minor player compared with local Sereno and Crip or Blood sets. So what's the story here? MS-13 in Washington is part of a hybrid environment. Individual members and small cliques intersecting with Mexican cartels and local gangs for drug distribution. They're not controlling territory. They're not running city blocks. They're just well-connected, brutal, and useful in the drug trade. If California is about infrastructure and New York is about spectacle, Washington is about MS-13 as a service provider in someone else's operation. You need heroin moved from Yakima to the East Coast? Call MS-13. You need an initiation killing to prove loyalty? MS-13 will do it. No territorial control, no political influence, just brutal efficiency in a crowded market. And that's Washington, the gang in the orchards and the ports. 8 states, 8 completely different gangs. Because here's the reality. MS-13 isn't a criminal empire, it's a brand. A loose federation of cliques that share an identity, but operate with huge autonomy. But the one constant? Violence. And even that violence looks different depending on where you are. If you learned something new, hit the like button. Subscribe if you want more deep dives into America's weirdest and darkest corners.